Hi everyone. I've just been at convocation shaking hands with 300 people and wishing them congratulations, and my voice is just about done. So hoping I can hang in here. It's such a pleasure to be here as part of this event to honour my dear friend Duncan Sinclair. Duncan, you know, you're brilliant, charming, kind. You're an incredibly special person, and I think it's only right that we celebrate you at least once a year. So I'm really happy to be here to help with that, and also wonderful and delighted that Laura Rosella is giving the Duncan Sinclair lecture later this afternoon. She's truly, I think, an outstanding health scholar at the intersection of public health and tech. So we're in for a treat. Okay, so there's a lot to talk about here, and I am conscious that we might not have enough time to really dig into things. So I want to basically explain that lawyers like me who think about regulation and the regulators that exist, like Health Canada and the FDA and so on, the equivalents all around the world, the first thing to note is that they can and do regulate AI in health. So around the world, software is defined, AI software is defined as a medical device. So you might think of a medical device as something hard, right, a cochlear implant or something along those lines. But in every jurisdiction, it has been defined to include software, and so that means AI. Now, you might already be thinking, well, if you're an innovator, I don't want that. But this is actually very, very good from a Canadian perspective, because otherwise we'd be dealing with 10 provinces and 3 territories, and it would be, you know, this is a legal phrase, a shit show. So having it central is actually fantastic. So there is a great opportunity here for us to regulate well. But I'm just going to cut to the chase. The trouble is that the regulations under the Food and Drug Act, which are actually kind of quasi-criminal powers, that's where the federal government gets its powers, they're very old school, right? So they're old school in the sense that the way that regulators have thought about these things, like pharmaceuticals or medical devices, is they take a look at them, they take a look at the evidence, and they say, green, yes, red, no. And that's it. Right? So green to go, good, knock yourself out, caveat emptor, let the market rip, all those good things. You know, maybe if a whole lot of people die, someone will alert the media, and there might be something done later on down the track. But they rely on the evidence as they come into the licensing phase. Right? So those of you who are innovators and have probably just seen the examples that you've had today, you can see that that is not going to work, because AI, machine learning, by definition, is changing. Right? So you get it at one point in time, you are expecting it to change. So it's not the same thing necessarily. It might be similar, but it could be actually very different down the line. Now, we hope mostly it is actually evolving to be better, and in fact, it's actually kind of dangerous to say, well, we just wanted one thing. That will actually degrade even faster or be more problematic, right? So machine learning that's evolving and changing, mostly that's what we want. We want it to evolve and change. You know, something that is developed in a beautiful academic hospital, downtown Toronto or Montreal, lovely. But then when it's taken up to, you know, the far north, a very different context, it's going to work differently. and you want to know how it's going. So this means, this means what we need is a life cycle approach, right? We have to have eyes on what is happening with AI as it's being deployed. We have to have that, and we're not really there. So there's some understanding of that from regulators around the world, but there is a big gap between where we are, that's why I called it Mind the Gap, between where we are and our aspiration, right? The regulatory aspiration and what it can achieve. There's a big gap. So just as AI is innovating like heck, we have to innovate. Regulators, lawyers, people thinking about governance, we've got to get our act together really fast to make this work for us all. Let me, I'm an AI optimist. Laura might actually present some of this as well, but another one of her colleagues was talking about this in a recent talk I was at, about the work that they're doing monitoring ICUs using big data. A kid that's going to have a stroke in an ICU, very low numbers. The humans involved hardly ever will ever see this. But big data, there's enough of them over time that you can actually have some prediction about who is likely to be the kid. And this helps them, using AI to support folks in the ICU helps them identify who is actually at risk and to prioritize them for surveying and looking after. And they're seeing across the board reductions in mortality of 20%. Now, that is really something. That is truly, truly something. So you talked about some of the other benefits of Scribe. These are the benefits are undoubtedly, potentially enormous. But there are real risks, and we've heard about some of them. So the garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have high quality data, you're going to get poor results. Or particularly, let me say this, if you don't have data that reflects the population that the AI tool is actually going to be worked on. So you don't need to have perfect representative data of all of Canadian society. I hear some of my colleagues kind of talking like that's what we need. That's ridiculous. It's never going to happen anyway, and you don't actually need it to do the work that you need to do. But if you're using data that has been trained on, a lot of white men, and you're young white men, and you're actually going to use it on elderly, racialized women, there might be a problem. It might not be. There might be physiologically, whatever it is. It might be tickety-boo. But there's a possibility there could be a problem, right? So this is complicated. We need to understand the risks of algorithmic bias in a particular AI product. The answer to that, to some extent, is like hoover up all the data that is humanly possible, and I bet you are all data-hungry hounds. Give me data. I heard someone saying research ethics boards are killing me, kind of thing. This is why we need to hang out together more, because we'll learn to love each other and you'll start to understand the benefits of privacy. The hoovering it all up is one solution, but we know that there are real risks to people of their health data being used by banks, by insurance companies, by all of these folks. They want this data, right? And they're permitted to actually discriminate against you on the grounds of your health status with this data. And with AI, even anonymized data is not going to protect you anymore, right? Because AI can re-identify you pretty quickly. So this is a real risk to folks. A lot of us are talking about privacy laws that have to be overhauled completely, because the idea of anonymized data, consent, right? Like how many of you, I'm a dean of law, I just tick everything online because I had no choice, right? Consent is a joke right now. Like, you have no choice, you just sign it anyway. And they can repurpose your data, take your data, sell your data, take it offshore, do all sorts of things with your data. It's a worry. And yet, on the other hand, we want data to be able to develop terrific health AI. Okay, so we have a conundrum there. We have to figure this out. That's my other day job, maybe. I wish people would pay me more for this. So the other, so I should have started out by saying that that Canada's been attempting to put in place federal regulation governing AI, and it had a draft bill called ADA, which died on the order table as we went into the federal election. And that's, so perhaps that will be resuscitated now. They have a new minister for AI, Evan Solomon, so we might see something happening there. But I just want to point out that regardless of that, the regulations and what we're dealing with here for most of health data would still be Health Canada's regulation of medical devices. So under the ADA Act, that was carved out. And that's true in pretty much every other jurisdiction. So, but regardless of the law that, some big law, right, so ADA or some big legislation, there's still law in place. So we heard about medical malpractice law, right? So if something goes wrong, perhaps you can sue, and tort law and say, well, either the manufacturer made a mistake or the physician or clinician using the AI made a mistake. So we've been studying this for quite a while, and our conclusion is this is really no protection really at all. And in fact, I think what we're hearing is quite a bit about physicians being involved in the AI, right? That physicians in the loop, you hear this a lot, provider in the loop. We want to have the physician in the loop, the clinician in the loop. Somehow these people are going to be able to magically understand machine learning and stop mistakes. I don't know how you feel about that. But if you put your hand up to say, put me in the loop, we'll put you in the loop, all right? You will take the liability, right? Even if you don't understand it. So you have to be very careful here for what you wish for with this provider in the loop business, which I basically, as you can tell, don't really have a lot of time for. Because it seems to me that you're taking on responsibility where you don't actually have the information and can't possibly, even the programmers don't really understand, how the machine learning tool is making the decision sometimes. So how am I, as a family doctor, meant to figure this out? So this is really underscores the importance of good regulation from the get-go, right? You as a doctor want to know, or as a nurse or as a clinician, you want to know that the product is reasonably safe. Right? You shouldn't have to undo the capsule of the prescription and examine it to make sure it's okay, should you? And the same with the AI tool. It should be reasonably safe. It doesn't mean you turn your brain off completely, but it is really important that we have appropriate regulation from Health Canada or wherever to help us, help you know that you can use this tool and someone has got their eye on the ball. Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead because I know we want to get to discussion time. So as I mentioned, here's the problem, is that what we need is governance that looks over the entire life cycle of health AI. Right? We need to know how it's going to work, not just now as we're licensing it from Health Canada's perspective, but in 6 months and 12 months. Geography, we need to know how it's going to work in downtown Toronto, and if it's devolving and doing something weird up in Thunder Bay, we need to know that. Right? We need to know that. How are we going to know that? So the way that the law works is that responsibility is largely downloaded onto the innovator. The innovator is meant to be the one, the manufacturer of the health AI is meant to be the one that clangs the bell to say, things are going wrong. It's like asking the fox to guard the chicken coop, right? Like, ooh, I made a mistake. So Health Canada, I'm sorry, right? It is not really much of a solution. So what we really need is actually public surveillance, right? We actually need to know the public infrastructure needs to be monitoring how health AI is actually working out there and detecting, like if suddenly some things are going wrong or we're seeing odd rates of breast cancer, either high or low in particular areas, to say, hey, is it maybe the AI tool? Maybe it's some other reason. But to expect the innovator to do that, I tell you what we'll do, we're going to just crush any ability for small and medium-sized Canadian innovators to play here. Right, so we actually need that infrastructure. So I've got, I spent ages on ChatGPT building this thing. Look at this. So, here's the gap, right? So the regulator focuses really on pre-market approval. What we want is safety and effectiveness of AI for healthcare. This is the gap, the post-market surveillance, right? This is where we're falling down. Some of you might be innovators. What I hear is, regulation kills innovation. We need more of a love affair here, folks, right? We need to love each other because, in fact, good regulation, optimal regulation, is going to help Canadian innovators. It's going to help them compete, and we want to weed out the ones that aren't very good because that will wreck trust in about 5 seconds flat. So this regulatory burden, we often hear about this idea. I spent ages on this too, and I got a little heart on the guy there, made of a maple leaf. The regulatory burden, when you think about what I just told you about that, it's actually on the innovators, the manufacturer has to be the one that alerts, Health Canada that there are problems. How is like a little innovator meant to do that? Like, that's a real regulatory burden to me. So if we had better public post-market surveillance, so I think of it as like that's the robust trampoline, right, of which many kind of health AI innovations can spring. So they can bounce up, supported by that. We can have a lot more great health AI innovations. And I did the traffic light, because what I'm trying to say is instead of red or green, it needs to be sort of flashing amber all the time, right? You shouldn't be keeping most things out. Much should be coming in if it's, reasonably constructed. And then we should be monitoring it over time to make sure that it's going well. And if we could do that, we can help really set the stage for Canadian health AI innovators to both support our own healthcare system and I think really compete globally. They have much better evidence, much better ability to say, look how well this thing actually works in these diverse contexts. So that's my dream, that we will all be happy together. And thank you so much for listening to me today.